Well, last time around, we talked about PDA and what it is and how it is perceived by different parts of society. We talked about the distinction from ODD, the oppositional defiant disorder. We talked about how it is at its core a panic response. We talked about how role play can be a very useful and essential tool for PDAers and people living with someone with PDA alike. And we talked about the generational divide on how to deal with PDA. And this time around, I want us to dive a bit deeper into what PDA really is. I wanted to discuss what people perceive as laziness, manipulation, and defiance, and discuss what it really is at its core.
Okay.
Then I wanted to move on to talk about strategies on how to deal with PDA, either for you if you are a PDA or for someone in your life that might have PDA, you suspect them to have PDA, and how you can help them deal with procrastination, demands, and life in general. I'm Dr. Tom, psychiatrist, specialist in neurodiversity. I'm a neurodiversity advocate, and this channel has a clear, unapologetic stance in defense of neurodiverse people. No BS, no virtue signaling, just solid, honest content grounded in science, lived experience, and real-world relevance. If you're tired of cliches and want strong, actionable ideas that challenge stigma, clarify concepts, and empower neurodivergent individuals and allies alike, you are in the right place.
What do we want to start with?
I want to start with the misconception that PDA is laziness. We've discussed a bit about how people think PDA is laziness in our past episode, but I want to discuss how PDA is a form, I guess, of executive dysfunction.
Okay.
But it also differs from executive dysfunction in a way. The most obvious being that it is a panic response. But I want to touch a bit on the 3 p.m. syndrome as well and how that relates to what we were talking about in PDA.
Okay. So this is the first time mentioning executive dysfunction in the podcast. Do you want to do like a quick definition of that for people?
Sure, awesome. So executive dysfunction is also one of the main symptoms of neurodiversity overall. It's usually more related to ADHD than it is to ASD or giftedness or any other neurodiversity. But it's an overall problem for all neurodiversities where you end up wanting to do a task, but you really just cannot fathom to start and nor finish the task just because of neurological dysfunction other than what happens in PDA.
Okay. And another thing you mentioned related to that is the 3 p.m. syndrome, which I think is a great example of executive dysfunction. So if you want to...
Sure. So 3 p.m. syndrome is the idea that if there's one appointment that you have at 3 p.m., you kind of get stuck with that appointment in your head and you somehow cannot manage to do anything else with your day because it's right in the middle of your day. So it's not enough time for you to start doing anything that's useful in the morning because you kind of already mentally prepare for your 3 p.m. appointment. You might even start that the day before, right at night, where you're trying to sleep, but you kind of keep imagining what could happen at your 3 p.m. appointment. So you end up not doing anything with your morning, and then you end up not doing anything with the rest of your day as well, because it's just right at the worst possible spot at 3 p.m. when you get home like at 5 p.m. and it's also not enough time to start anything. So let's say you wanted to clean the dishes or clean your house or start playing video games in a coordinated manner, not just doom scroll or get stuck in a eternal Candy Crush cycle. If you wanted to do anything like this, the 3 p.m. appointment really kills you because you get stuck in kind of chunks of time that are going to be really useless for you. So everything from the time you wake up until like 1 p.m., 2 p.m., maybe noon, because you have to prepare specifically, like take a shower, get dressed, and think about your commute. And everything after that is also lost because you get home at a really bad time. Then you have to think about getting ideally your third meal of the day, already consider sleeping. It's a really common occurrence in neurodiversity overall.
Sure. And one of the big key parts here, I think, is that it's not saying, oh, I have things scheduled for the entire day and there's something at 3. It's no, you don't have anything until 3, that's set in stone. And then your entire morning is open. You could do other things. You could wash clothes. You could do whatever else. But because you have that 3 p.m., you are stuck focused on that 3 p.m. so much that you can't start other tasks because your mind is just focused on that one thing happening later.
Yeah, there's a really important thing that's intrinsic and implicit about the 3 p.m. syndrome is that you obviously, while suffering the 3 p.m. syndrome, you obviously catch yourself doing that. And that just makes it worse because now you know well, maybe if you name it as a 3 p.m. syndrome or second half of the day crash or whatever, if you give it a name, maybe there's a higher chance you will understand that this is something that's expected and that other people do share this experience. So you might have self-compassion to kind of circumnavigate that and deal with it better. But usually by catching yourself stuck in the 3 p.m. syndrome, you just make it worse.
Sure. You almost you feel bad about it, and then those bad feelings make you less likely to fix or do something else.
As a neurodiverse person or PDA or ASD, ADHD, you kind of start believing the narrative that people have about who you are, and that you might start thinking, yeah, really, I am lazy for real. If you're going back to psychoanalytical strategies on how to deal with that stuff, you might start believing that you are really auto-sabotaging yourself because you don't really believe you deserve to be happy. And all of these kind of narratives are obviously pretty dangerous. And what we try to do in behavioral sciences is to kind of normalize the opposite. We want to try to normalize that you can want to be whatever misconception of useful person you have in the morning, and also not being capable of doing anything other than your 3 p.m. appointment. The specific skill we talk about here is called dialectical thinking. So in pop psychology, we usually say, yeah, I wanna slim down, I wanna lose a few pounds for my summer body. But here I am eating 3 pounds of Oreos. And then in pop science and pop psychology, we say, yeah, you don't want to slim down. You're just faking. You're just auto-sabotaging. You feel like you probably don't deserve it because you agree with your parents that you're not worthy of having a summer body, whatever.
Because I need you to clarify that a little bit for me. Because you talk about, okay, I want to lose weight, but I'm eating unhealthy food. Therefore, I am self-sabotaging.
Yeah, pop psychology would tell you that you have external proof that you really don't want to do what you want to do.
Okay.
Because you're eating the Oreos. That's just not true. You can have two coexisting, apparently contradictory thoughts or behaviors and still want the other. That's also true.
Okay.
So while I was not capable of not eating my 3 pounds of Oreos right now, I still want my summer body and I still want the six pack.
Okay. So when you say pop psychology, because that's new as well here, pop psychology, you're talking about like social media psychology, like people who aren't really giving therapy. They're telling you, it's like when you see a bodybuilder do a reel and they're like, oh yeah, you can lose the weight. You could. That's what you mean by pop psychology.
Yeah, it's like common sense advice that's over-the-counter advice that's not tailored to who you are, and that might have worked for someone. Like a really common occurrence of pop science, pop psychology in daily life is when you're a special someone who has had a really great epiphany of what really makes sense to them, and they want to apply this to you, even though it might not work.
Okay, so pop psychology isn't really. We're not talking about professional. We're talking
about common misconceptions.
Okay.
While in different kinds of psychotherapy, you would get to the conclusion that you're actually trying to sabotaging yourself because you do have external proof, like here it is, the packages of chips and Doritos and Oreos and whatever. That might make you believe that you actually don't want it, and then you create some kind of cognitive dissonance, right? So here's my external proof that I actually don't want the summer body. So I'll probably stop wanting the summer body because it's easier to resolve my cognitive dissonance. I don't have to deal with the contradictory evidence. And what we want to teach people is to apply the opposite. We want to teach people to apply what we call dialectical thinking. Dialectical thinking is, at its core, having two thoughts or behaviors that are apparently contradictory, but really are not. So while I would say, here I am wanting my summer body, but I'm eating 3 pounds of Oreos, in dialectical thinking, we would say, here I am wanting my summer body and eating 3 pounds of Oreos, because they're not actually contradictory. Actually, the fact that I want my summer body and I'm doing like liquid fasting and trying so hard to whip the pounds away probably makes it more likely for me to eat the 3 pounds. So even though of Oreos, so even though it, on the surface seems like you're obviously sabotaging yourself, you're not helping, you might not know what you want, you really are fooling yourself by still believing that you actually want the summer body. We try to reframe it in a way where it actually makes sense. Most of these actually make a lot of sense. So if you're saying like, hey, I really want to be a calm and self-centered Zen Buddhist yogi, you'll find it probably harder to do yoga on the spot or meditate whenever, because you have this narrative. And this narrative and the belief that you want to prove makes it harder. And this is really, really PDA.
Okay.
If you think out of it. So by wanting something really hard, it's actually makes it harder for you to do it, right? It's the PDA might have a really strong narrative about who they want to be, which in turn makes the demand harder, which in turn makes them lose control over how to go about it. So reframing this in terms of self-compassion, being capable of failing along the way, being capable of dialectical thinking, and understanding that failing is part of the process, you really get a really good way to circumnavigate the feeling of laziness. But what I wanted to allude to originally is to make sure you don't fall into this false narrative that might be imposed by peers, by parents, by teachers, and not start believing, you are actually that kind of person. You might just start believing you're not good at math because one of your teachers showed you that you were solving the problem inadequately,
Sure,
deviating from the norm. That's what we're talking about here.
It's interesting when you talked about if you want to be something. In your case, you're talking about being calm and Zen yoga, for example. If you want to be great at yoga, you're more likely to almost have a crash when trying to prove that, because your own idea is you have to be a professional. So you're not okay with doing it halfway.
Exactly. You actually end up creating a version.
Right. So unless you can be that version, you don't even try. So relating to PDA, if I look at a task that I need to do, if I am not able to accomplish that task in a way that is satisfactory to me or to other people, I'm more likely to not even try to start it. Is that
100%? That's exactly it. If the way you think about completing that task is insufficient for your narrative or the narrative you want to uphold towards others, you're more likely to not do that stuff. So let's say you were in a summer camp, your mentors there really got an idea that you're really good at American football, but you're not sure if you can have another really good quarterback throw, whatever.
Sure.
Really
like
good
stage fright almost.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah, exactly. So you'd rather probably avoid it and kind of feel like you're lazy. So probably the most common example that you already gave in our last talk as well is the dishwashing stuff, right? If your parents create a narrative of you being a really good helper, you being a dishwasher, your siblings, we have to ask them every time to do anything for us, but you do it spontaneously. That's so cool. That's so nice. You might end up being one of your siblings in the end, because it's going to make it harder for you to keep doing a task.
The pressure of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is really important. So to understand that we're not talking about laziness, but we're talking about a stress response. In the brain of the PDA, what goes on is that you really feel this pressure mounting, and you feel like you have to live up to that standard that you're setting yourself, or that might be implicit through the demand that's been given you. It's not executive dysfunction in the sense of not being able to, but it's due to the stress response that you cannot do it. So if you can circumnavigate the stress response, there's a good chance that you might be capable of doing it again in a different, if you can reframe the demand.
Okay. So comparing ED and PDA, it sounds more like you said, pressure, panic is, even though they can appear similar to the outside person, internally, the difference is more of a panic and pressure response for PDA.
That's PDA at its core. It's really a panic response. And we have to find ways to deal with that panic response and reframe the demand in a way that the PDA can deal with it. We can even be really creative about this. But let me talk about the second misconception about PDA here, just to give us a bit more of a framework to work with. The person with PDA in social interaction that lives through PDA in social interaction is kind of manipulating either the contact with peers, the communication that's going on through text or in person, whatever, and that the person that lives with PDA might try to get a bigger reward for doing it. That's not at all what PDA is about. It's not about, getting like a cash prize for doing the dishes, but it's not about manipulating. It's not about trying to make you feel like I'm ghosting you or that I feel like I'm better than you. It's just about the stress response for real. So it doesn't really help anyone to increase the reward or to fall into a pattern of a social dynamic or dynamic with your special someone where you double down on the PDA response. You have to find a way to reframe and to go around the PDA in a way that makes sense to everyone involved, and make sure you understand that the person is not trying to manipulate you, make you feel bad, or avoid you, or hate on you.
Right. So connecting the two, you're talking about like, if let's change the the topic from washing dishes. Let's say laundry. So let's say I haven't done laundry, or better yet, I've done my laundry. I haven't folded the laundry because I feel like that's a part where people really hit a wall sometimes. So I haven't folded my laundry. It's not because I'm being lazy. I'm stressed out. I have pressure to do the task, so I'm having that internal panic and just can't bring myself to start it. But to someone on the outside, they might go, well, hey, if you can finish the laundry today, and this is more for kids, if you finish the laundry today, let's go get McDonald's for dinner. You're offering a reward, but that's not PDA. PDA is, we're not expressing laziness or a defiance to do the task for a reward. We're doing it because of the panic, and the reward is not going to solve the part of the panic. Now, as a kid, you might go, oh, McDonald's, I'm super excited. And that maybe that energy will boost enough that you can push through it, but that's not solving the problem. That's giving you like a dopamine or serotonin boost.
That might not even work, because by giving or promising a reward, you're probably increasing the perception of the demand on that person, on the PDA. It's almost like the punishing behavior. If you don't do this, I'm gonna take away your PlayStation, whatever.
Yeah. And some people react differently with punishments versus rewards too. That's a whole nother conversation.
So there is the idea that that's also even a really popular idea in Brazil. Just do it. So Nike is gonna be mad about this, but the suck it up, shut up, just do it mindset in Brazil, it's if you're afraid, then do it anyways while being afraid, right? It really doesn't work for PDA at all. You have to sit down with that person and ask them if you can figure out a collaborative approach to how to deal with the task at hand. That obviously, and we talked about this at length in our previous episode, but that should be the norm for any kind of interaction either way. It doesn't really have to be neurodiversity related at all. But making sure you understand that you're on the same page, that you're helping, that you can be creative about how to go about the task is really important. That's much better than promising rewards that either aren't going to be sustainable or they're going to make it worse for the PDA, or worse than that, punishing for behaviors that are expected and that are not being upheld just because it makes the panic response worse.
Sure. And in my example, I said that the parent would offer a reward, but really that reward is also a punishment, because if you do it, there's a reward. So you're going to feel more pressure to do it because you want the positive outcome, but there is a punishment to it as well. The punishment might not be, oh, if you do it, something bad will happen, but the punishment is you don't get
the absence of the reward.
Right. So by offering it, you're just putting extra pressure for both sides, the punishment and reward side of it.
Yeah, no, that's either way bad parenting anyways, but even talking about your special someone in your life, if you're trying to, I don't know, promise a night of fun sex, whatever, that's just going to make it worse either way.
Sure.
That really gives us a really good chance to be neurodiversity affirmative and be the best person we can be and try to talk about stuff openly and communicate preferences and accommodations that you can make without having to lower the bar, without changing the benchmark. So PDAs don't need to, and they don't want to have different sets of benchmarks or conditions or no boundaries. That's not at all what PDA is about. But we have to make sure the PDA feels in control while doing the demand.
It's not any kind of special circumstances with that. It's, as you said, more about the control of it. So maybe someone without PDA can be asked to do a task and they go, okay, it's a task, it's 5 minutes, I'm done. Someone with PDA can look at the task and go, yeah, it's 5 minutes and I'm done. But because you asked me to do it, I don't have the control of the situation, and then there's pressure about it. And being asked to do something does add pressure. So you lose that control when an outside influence wants you to do something.
Yeah, it's really important to remember what we talked about in our previous episode about how you don't have to have a harsh demand or punitive behavior to get you in a PDA crisis. You can also do that through reward or positive framing, whatever. So this is really important also because this ties well back in with the manipulation part. If you're doing a collaborative approach as instructed, as recommended, the PDA might still ask you to just not participate in what they need to do. And then we have to understand that this is, again, not a manipulative strategy. This doesn't mean that they're kind of discarding your help, but they have to know, and they will know. Maybe they have to have a few goes at it, but after a few trials and errors, the PDA will know how they function best and what they can do, what you can do, and what they need from you so they can function the best way. So we're gonna talk about strategies later on, but body doubling is a really frequent recommendation for PDAs, and PDAs might enjoy body doubling very much so they can do their task, while other PDAs might hate the idea of body doubling because they still feel some kind of pressure. That might also even depend on the body that's doubling. So that person that's there might still make difference here. So trying to be creative and respectful and accommodate for that person's specific wishes is either way the best strategy, but very important for PDA.
Yeah, and manipulation, I think, just to add to that topic, I don't feel like manipulation is always so harsh either. It's not that someone is going, I'm going to do this task, therefore I need you to leave, or I need you to do something for me. Like there's no necessarily exchange of favors in manipulation. It could be just simple things like, hey, while I'm doing the dishes, please don't come into the kitchen. To someone that doesn't have PDA, that might look like they're saying, oh, I don't want you around. I don't want you near me. I this is my space now. But for the person with PDA, it's not that. It's, I just need to be in control and to focus on the task. And you being present might distract me, might cause me to stop doing what I'm doing. It's not that I'm trying to control you. I'm trying to control myself and control the situation. And therefore, I need you to do this for me in order for me to remain in control and continue whatever task I am doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
The manipulation that you might feel, like that also goes both ways. The PDAR might feel manipulated by your saying, hey, good job, thank you, and that also won't work. The PDAR feels very strongly against being manipulated, obviously, because that's the pervasive demand for autonomy, right? You don't want to be compliant to something that you don't agree or not agree on your terms. We have to think about how the PDAR might perceive manipulation as well. So it's really important for everyone involved to just take things at face value, not get to any implicit or magical conclusions that aren't stated clearly. Having the definitions ready and making sure everybody understands what's being said is important. So if you're being asked to please leave the premises because that will help me clean the room, you don't have to, you should not, you should avoid at all cost to think that this means that that person doesn't like you around. Sure. Very much the opposite is true.
Yeah. They just need the moment themselves. Yeah. And I liked the part where you talked about how well you do a task too. And I could see this as someone doing this to me. If someone tells me, oh my God, you are the best at this task, whether it's at work or home, whatever, if they're making the extra effort to say you're the best at this, in my mind, I'm going, they're trying to make me do it this way all the time. And there's a pressure with that. Oh my God, you're the best at, I don't know, build it or doing this report. Great. I like the compliment. But at the same time, now I have to make sure that I'm doing that report all the time. And if I'm going to be doing that report all the time, I have to make sure that the standard only improves. It can never go worse. So there's a pressure to that. And you do feel manipulated as the person, because you might look at it and go, maybe they're telling me I'm the best at this because they don't want to do that task. They want me to do that task. And therefore, I always have to do that task.
So if you have a really good basis of communication with the person you're talking about, like the boss or the special someone, whatever, if you have a really good basis for communication here, you can make sure that you both understand that neither one is trying to manipulate the other. So if you are a PDA and you're aware that this happens, that you kind of feel manipulated into doing something, it would be really cool for you to be capable of talking to that person that you feel as the manipulator here, and make sure you're both on board with no implicits, no magical beliefs, no just face value for everything. It still demands a bit of self-advocacy on the PDA to make sure they can stand up for themselves and say, hey, I might perceive this as manipulation. Can we talk about this?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the best.
And your example there, your tip there, really makes sense why PDA is present in neurodiversity, because you talked about the face value of things. And that's, I think, a big trait in most neurodiversities is if I try to read between the lines, it's going to cause a problem. I'd much rather someone be very direct. And so if someone is giving me a compliment and I'm not sure if they're being direct and without manipulation, then I'm going to read between the lines, and maybe I create that manipulation in my mind that isn't actually there. If that person is more direct, and I know that if they give me a compliment, it is strictly a compliment, I'm less likely to have that panic, because I can go, oh, it's a compliment. Okay.
That should always be the norm, either way, for any kind of communication. But it's really easy to see how a PDA might just break if they have to guess what's between the lines. So I want to bring a personal example here real quick. I got a microphone recently, and they sent me the wrong one. And I saw by the packaging that it was the wrong one. So I gave it back. And then while having to talk to the chatbot about because for the reason why I wanted to give it back, he asked me whether or not it came in an original packaging. And I said, yes or no, probably. And then it asked me, does it have any defects? I didn't open the pack. I saw by the package, it kind of broke me in a way that I couldn't really answer. So sometimes there is unexpected reason, specifically with bots and online interaction, like robot, humans, whatever. That's really hard because everything there is really literal. And if there's just no answer that corresponds to the real answer to your no yes, you kind of break yourself. So my workaround was to make sure I'm pretty sure I answered there were no defects, because I felt like this was probably gonna lead the robot to not give me another stupid question. And then I made a comment on, I did not open the package, don't plan on. But I have to feel like I had to give the disclaimer to make sure they understand that I did not answer that I opened the package. Because I did not open the package. You see?
Yeah. If they ask if there's a defect, you're like, I assume not.
But that was not an answer.
Right.
Yes or no. Right? So being really explicit and being really at face value is definitely important. It's not just for ASD, neurodiversity overall. Let's move on to defiance. I feel like defiance also works really nicely when we consider the face value stuff, the explicit. If someone asks me to do a thing and we have an agreement on it, I'll always try to adhere to the agreement at face value. If there's something implicit to that agreement that's not there on paper, black and white, I have little chance of understanding what might be implicit. So I will end up not doing it. But if it's implicit in a sense of, I don't know, it's implicit that you have to give a tip at a restaurant and you're an asshole if you don't, that's really hard. So unless there's a specific rule that's out there in the open, whatever, that's might be paralyzing.
Okay.
So one thing that I just wanted to add really quick here is the tip culture is very different across cultures, right? So you got to know the American, you know the Brazilian system. I also know the Austrian. So in Austria and in France, where I spent my European lives, you kind of round up the numbers. You know, like, okay, your total is 21. You'll probably give 25 euros. That's about right. In the States, you are aware that you're supposed to move the decimal one over and give it at least 10%. Or you might also do just, the few singles.
Right.
And leave it on the table. In Austria, if I left something on the table, probably would come after me saying, hey, you forgot your money here. So, and in Brazil, which is within those three cultures probably easier, the tip is already included in your total. Like they have a standard tip percentage. It's either 10 or 13. Sometimes it's 15%. Kind of depends on the restaurant, but it's expected, and the restaurant tells you it's expected. You still have the option to opt out of the tip, but it's really the most explicit version of tipping. But whenever my family comes to Brazil, they always feel kind of unsatisfied with just doing the formal, explicit, written tip that's kind of obligatory, right?
Okay.
And so my parents will always try to tip
more
extra, because they just don't feel, but that also shows you that even if we consider them neurotypical, they still feel kind of unsafe, like they're doing almost like they're stealing from the servers because they don't respect their tipping culture.
Interesting.
But I really like the Brazilian version a lot because it's really explicit.
Right. And for anyone listening, if you tip in Brazil, it is on the bill and there's no expectation to add more. Like culturally, or the restaurant, if you pay that tip that's on that bill, the restaurant is totally happy with that. Yeah, paying more is very different.
I've had many situations that we lived through where my father tried to tip extra, and the first few he tried to tip in cash, which doesn't work in Brazil at all because nobody accepts cash. It's all card payments, right? And then he moved over to give me the bill, and he asks for a pen, and then a waiter gives him a pen, and then he kind of crosses out the original value, and then he puts a new value down. So like, let's say it's 185 with tips, and he would cross out the 185 and put 200. So please do 200 on the card.
Which is interesting because I don't even know how restaurants would handle that.
Yeah, the taxes and deducting and whatever, it's always a situation. It's never easy. I feel like mostly people understand that he's trying to be nice.
Sure.
But they also feel like a stupid gringo. Fucking over system.
In this situation, you're talking about almost cultural norms. There are unspoken rules, we say. So you have that with driving, you have that everything you do in your life, you have unspoken rules, which is a little bit harder to navigate. You don't have to do them, but you're kind of expected to. So
yeah, you usually kind of are expected. So I'm gonna give another personal example here because it also feels very much like defiance on my part. But in Brazil, people don't really follow the speed limits, right? On streets.
Speed limits, lanes, there's a lot of it.
But it's part of the culture and it's expected. So there is one specific road in Brazil that goes down to the coast. It's since been modernized, so it's not the same issue anymore. But back then when I took this, called Tamoios, it used to be like this really hard mountain road with lots of fog and rain and usually a 30 kilometers an hour speed limit with a few radars along the road. If you follow the speed limit, you're being active danger to everybody involved because everybody is trying to pass you and there's only one lane going down and they cannot pass you because you're following the 30. So people would try to do really crazy, risky overtaking. And the number of times people kind of, insult me or honk at me. Yeah, exactly. They definitely understood my behavior as defiance, even though I felt like I was strictly just following the norm. And it took me quite some time to get up to speed and really follow Brazilian rules. Now I feel like I'm very well adapted, but it took me a few years. It's really hard because if you follow the rules strictly as they're stated, you might be seen as defiant very, very easily. And then, the other concept of the social proof concept, right? The social proof, you can always try to be a PDA that's more interested in being adapted, which was my solution, actually. I'm trying to be adaptive and trying to be well adapted in the end. And just follow social proof. And use social proof as the new norm. And social proof would be the written, the agreed upon. But it's still not the one that's written, that's black and white. It's still not the speed limit. You're still liable of getting radared. So really hard.
Yeah, you're navigating between the two. I get that. Yeah, that can be extra hard. I have an example for defiance that I think a lot of people could relate to. So if you have a boss and your boss wants something from you, it's not mandatory. They just want something that would make them happy, but I just don't want to do it. That's very defiant. And I think we sometimes have to look at things and weigh our benefits versus costs. In this case, when you have a boss that wants something from you, even if it's something you don't want to do, but it's small, maybe the benefit of just doing it outweighs the cost of the defiance.
Perceived defiance.
Right. Weighing those two options, will I get more benefit from doing it, even if I don't want to, is helpful in navigating expectations. Because the boss expects you to do something. If I do it, he's happy. Maybe work will be a little bit more friendly. Maybe if I ask for favors, he's more likely to do it. So
sure. There is also, a flip side on this. It's called malicious compliance. There's a whole subreddit on malicious compliance where you strictly follow the rules, even though you know that's gonna turn out to be a really bad result for who asked you to follow the rules.
And that happens a lot at work.
And that's just beautiful. I love it. It's just wonderful. Like the malicious compliance is a really good example where following the rules is something that you're strictly doing what you're being asked for. And you might even tell the person, hey, I feel like if I do it this way, it's probably gonna be a bad result for you. But the person insists on doing it this way. So what shall you do?
Yeah, you can only warn them so much, or some people don't warn them on purpose.
If you are in a situation where you perceive someone to be defiant, it's obviously not always possible to try to look at what that behavior is at its core. That person might not have a therapist, that person might not have a service provider at all, but it's always helpful to understand where that behavior comes from. So one thing that many ASDers struggle with is that if you're not masking adequately in social communication, people might feel like you're actively defying. So I remember, again, a personal example here, but I remember that one of my teachers in class, in Austria, we usually do 2 weeks every year, we go on ski camp. So this was about 12, 13 years old. I remember strictly following the rules of being a good kid at a kind of Olympic camp games, and being really close to the scoring board. And my teacher just at some point got irritated with me and felt like I was being provocative or defiant or not making eye contact, whatever. And she ended up throwing me against the scoring board. I had a really big nosebleed after that. And I went to my room, and my peers had the great idea of calling up on that teacher, specific teacher. And she went there and asked me what happened. But it was really interesting because in a second moment when we talked about what happened, it was really obvious to her that I was not being defiant, and she publicly apologized later on. But I can now see really clearly how me wanting to have explicit rules and following explicit rules could have been seen as defiant, not trying to feel like I'm the one to blame here. As I stated earlier, it's really important that we always make an active effort to try to be neurodiversity affirmative.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and get notified when our next episode drops.